Chapter 751. The first lunar month was about to pass. The day in the desert had gradually become hot. In the warden's dormitory, Li Tianlan, who was wearing a white shirt casually, hung up the call with Dongqing Wudi. He looked at the yellow sand outside the window and narrowed his eyes. It had been half a year since he entered the desert prison. The desert was as quiet as usual. But the dark world was already turbulent. The influence of the mysterious expert's attack on the Wang family of Beihai half a month ago had completely spread. The video of the incident was completely spread throughout the dark world through different channels. The overwhelming sword swept up the fallen leaves on Mount Dibing. The majestic sword energy seemed to have the power to break the screen in the video and smashed into the hearts of all the big shots in the dark world. The casualties and losses of the Wang family of Beihai had already been calculated. Maybe it couldn't be called casualties and losses. It should be called death losses. No, to be exact, it should be a missing persons report. The sword covered tens of thousands of meters of heaven and earth, from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain, and swept a distance of thousands of meters. The momentum was tremendous and earth-shattering. But the whole process only took dozens of seconds. In these dozens of seconds, nearly 2,000 elites of the Beihai Corps stationed on Mount Dibing that day disappeared, 1,700 people of the Beihai Internal Defense Force disappeared, and hundreds of people of the Heaven Punishment Troop, which the Wang family of Beihai was proud of, disappeared, including 9 thundershocking realm experts. From the foot of the mountain to the top, nearly 400 sniping points on Mount Dibing were destroyed, and all the snipers were missing. 4 sets of weapon systems that could cover the entire Mount Dibing were completely destroyed. The Alloy Research Institute and No. 2 biological laboratory hidden in the belly of the mountain exploded, and 16 doctors were missing. The moment the sword energy swept past, everyone's body was completely smashed by the violent sword light. The entire Mount Dibing was completely turned into a white land by the sword, and not even a drop of blood was left on the spot. All the people who guarded the front of Mount Dibing that day were evaporated by the sword, and no bones were left. Mount Dibing was directly split into 2 halves from the summit to the ground. The 2 Mount Dibing were hundreds of meters apart. The water of the North Sea gushed in from this huge crack, submerging nearly 1/7 of the area of Xianxia City. Most of the area at the foot of Mount Dibing was submerged. A military base was covered by seawater. The surging waves even affected the military airport not far away. The fleet Tianlan swept across Beihai not long ago was just a hurricane for the Wang family of Beihai, then the sword in front of them was a sudden natural disaster for the Wang family of Beihai. The majestic palace, the elite troops, and the picturesque mountain peaks. Everything disappeared under that sword strike. The shocking sharpness seemed to be completely branded in the sky above the Wang family of Beihai, cutting them down from the peak of the dark world. They were no longer transcendent, no longer mysterious, no longer high above, and no longer insufferably arrogant. The dark world was not happy about it. Even the forces that had been against the Wang family of Beihai, such as the Jiang family of South America, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, and Emperor Dong's palace. No one was gloating. It was gratifying that the momentum of the Wang family of Beihai had fallen. But the mysterious heavenly sun who single-handedly crushed the entire Mount Dibing was also frightening. That was true fear. In a very short time, almost all the super forces in the dark world came to the same conclusion. At present, no one, no force, and no country in the dark world could stop that sword light. The power of this sword was even no less than that of the eternal sword in Eastern Europe. Maybe it was slightly weaker, but no one could see the difference. Such a person, even alone, was enough to set off a real large-scale war in any corner of the world. For this era, the existence of such a person was completely irresistible. All the forces were afraid. Because after the silence brought by fear passed, the whole world was in an uproar. Countless forces and countries were secretly issuing orders to find the clues of the mysterious strong man. The shocking sword also exposed the mind of the mysterious strong man. It could be said that he really regarded human life as grass. Such a person could not have no ambition. With his powerful force, it was enough to conquer all the dark forces in an instant and then unify the dark world. Everyone was looking for him, and even planned to join hands to kill him. Half a month had already passed since the incident. The dark world was still in an uproar. But the mysterious heavenly sun seemed to evaporate from the world, and all traces of his existence were lost overnight. Xianxia state was also looking for him, and even paid close attention to this aspect. So, Airbus, Rolls-Royce, and other companies had been hacked countless times in a few days. Xianxia state had looked for the mysterious heavenly sun in all aspects, but they had found nothing. Li Tianlan had been observing this matter silently and had not expressed any opinion. He had contacted Dongqing Wudi on his own initiative. On the day of the incident, the army headquarters had issued a direct document, and Dongqing Wudi personally signed the order. A highly integrated special force had been secretly dispatched. Dongqing Wudi even wanted to mobilize an ace army to guard the desert prison. However, this motion was not approved by the parliament, so he had to drop it. But Dongqing Wudi did not give up, and he still tried to increase the combat power here. In half a month, nearly 20,000 people had been stationed in the desert prison. Everyone could see that Dongqing Wudi was very nervous. The appearance of the mysterious heaven's favorite was like a huge variable. Up until now, everyone had always thought that only two people could stand against that kind of sharpness. The first was naturally Wang Tianzong in Eastern Europe. The second was Li Tianlan, who had reached the peak. Wang Tianzong was missing. Li Tianlan was still growing. If the mysterious heavenly sun wanted to eliminate the threat in the future, Li Tianlan was his most likely target. Dongqing Wudi had no reason not to be nervous. However, Li Tianlan refused Dongqing Wudi's idea of continuing to increase troops, and he even persuaded Dongqing Wudi to withdraw all the troops that had been temporarily dispatched. He always had an inexplicable sense of familiarity with the mysterious heavenly sun in the video. This sense of familiarity was not the reason why he felt safe, but an intuition. He really didn't think that an expert who had reached that level of personal strength would care about any future threat. If he didn't have this kind of broad-mindedness and bearing, he couldn't have come to this point. That was the real heavenly sun. In the eyes of such a person, there was only one kind of person and one kind of creature in the world: relatives and nonentities. Standing at that level, he wouldn't even have friends. To say the least, that kind of power could easily destroy the weapon system in the desert prison that was enough to stop an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. If he really wanted to come, it would be useless to send an ace army. If he was targeted by such a person, everything he did was in vain, and he couldn't escape at all. Although he could be calm, it didn't mean that he didn't have a sense of urgency. After Wang Tianzong disappeared, there seemed to be a towering mountain in front of him again. An invisible pressure pressed down. The sword light shining at the end of martial arts seemed to have become a huge pressure, pushing him forward. So when everyone was looking for the mysterious heavenly sun and wanted to know who he was, Li Tianlan was thinking about why he could come to that point. The office in front of him was clean and tidy, and a video was playing on the computer. He had played the sword strike that destroyed Mount Dibing hundreds of times. And 3 days ago, the Parliament of Xianxia State got another video. It was a pattern taken by the military satellite of Beihai Province. From a condescending perspective, the fallen leaves on Mount Dibing swept into a sky curtain. The sky curtain rushed to the top of Mount Dibing. The sword light of the 6 paths of reincarnation flickered in the fallen leaves, and then went out in an instant. There seemed to be only one kind of sword intent between heaven and earth, and nothing else. The picture was steady and clear. Li Tianlan clearly saw that the sword intent that was about to cover the top of the mountains suddenly became scattered. Most of the sword energy whistled over and went straight into North Sea. The sword energy rolled up monstrous waves on the sea level. The surging tide suddenly collapsed, and the entire sea area of tens of thousands of miles in the North Sea was almost completely chaotic. A small warship not far away sounded the alarm. The next second, a huge wave as high as 100 meters directly slammed down. The sword energy spread wildly, and the water curtain covered the screen. Vaguely, the whole warship was completely torn by the sword energy, and all the weapons inside exploded. In the earth-shattering noise, the fire burned on the sea level. The two figures on the stage of Formidable Person became extremely small on the satellite picture. Vaguely, the heavenly sun glanced at the stone of Formidable Person. The silver moon sword on the stone of Formidable Person seemed to have fallen into his hand voluntarily or passively. The young man looked down for a while and didn't take the silver moon away. Instead, he put it back. He seemed to have communicated with summer solstice, but it was very short. In the surging white mist, the other two people who were at the foot of the mountain directly appeared on the top of the mountain. The next moment, the mighty white mist went straight into North Sea. In an instant, a white line across the sky appeared on the turbulent sea level. The white line kept moving forward on the open sea, getting faster and faster, like a torrent between heaven and earth. Stars. Half an hour. To be exact, it was 26 minutes and 34 seconds. The white line between heaven and earth disappeared. Without any warning, he suddenly disappeared from the satellite's surveillance screen. Looking at the distance, in 26 minutes, they had crossed the sea level of hundreds of kilometers from Xianxia to Liaodong. If they hadn't disappeared and kept moving forward, they could have appeared on the port of Liaodong in less than a minute with their speed. But they suddenly disappeared from the sea level. Until today, there was no trace of their existence. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. This video was much longer than that sword. And every time he watched it, Li Tianlan couldn't help but tremble inside. In 26 minutes, they had crossed the sea level of hundreds of kilometers. This meant more than just speed. This distance was shorter than the distance from Reki City to Mormons. But a large part of the distance from Reki City to Mormons was land that could be borrowed. And this distance was all the water surface that could not be borrowed under normal circumstances. This alone was enough to make up for the gap. When Wang Tianzong broke through, it took him nearly 2 hours to go from Reki City to Mormons. As for Li Tianlan now, not to mention on the water. Even if he charged at full speed on land, he couldn't walk that far in half an hour. Even if there was no water limit, his physical strength couldn't rush across the vast ocean from Liaodong to North Sea. This was a chosen one who was really at the peak of his state. Not only was he at the peak of his realm, but also his physical strength and other aspects were at the peak of his age. Li Tianlan squinted and watched the video again. He was silent for a long time in the confrontation between the young man and summer solstice on the stage of Formidable Person. What did they say to each other? No one knew the answer to this question. From the attack to the present, the Wang family of Beihai had been silent. They didn't explain to Xianxia State or even make any statement to the outside world. Even inside Beihai province, they didn't give any statement. This kind of silence had gradually made the entire parliament of Xianxia State nervous. Beep. An urgent document from the army ministry suddenly came to him. Li Tianlan opened it and was slightly stunned. This document was not sent to Li Tianlan, but to Lieutenant General Xiaomahai, the warden. No matter how remote the desert prison was, no matter how nobody cared about the position of the warden, Xiaomahai was also a lieutenant general of Xianxia State. Although his position was hard, his military rank could be said to be one of the core officers of Xianxia State. When something major happened in the Xianxia State military, it was inevitable to inform him, even if it was symbolic. But this was the basic rule. The document was very formal, equivalent to a notice. Half an hour ago, the Wang family of Beihai officially announced the result of the handling of Dijiang. Dijiang was expelled from Mount Dibing because of a variety of charges, real and fake, and was escorted to Beihai prison indefinitely. 20 minutes ago, after an emergency discussion, the army headquarters of Xianxia State announced that they agreed to Dijiang's resignation as a member of Xianxia State, marshal, and commander of the Border Control Corps of Xianxia State. The commander of the Border Control Corps was temporarily held by Dongqing Wudi, the executive minister of the army headquarters. And it was not Wang Qinglei of Beihai or Summer Solstice who officially announced the expulsion of Dijiang and the imprisonment of the new invincible realm expert of Beihai. It was Wang Xingxiao. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and looked at the notice in front of him. He was silent for a long time. Dijiang was expelled and imprisoned. But it was not the capable general of the Wang family of Beihai who took over the Border Control Corps. After going around in circles for a few months, Li Tianlan finally opened her eyes. The position of commander of the Border Control Corps once again fell on Dongqing Wudi. Now he could even be said to be the most powerful executive minister of Zhongzhou State since the founding of Zhongzhou State, and it could even be said that he had power over the court and the opposition. And this unusual action represented Beihai's concession. And Dongqing Wudi taking over this position also meant one thing. In the face of the aggressiveness of the academics and the prince group, the Wang family of Beihai had reached an agreement with the giant group when Mount Dibing was attacked. Counterattack from the Wang family of Beihai. A storm from the North Sea province. It was about to begin. Chapter 752. At the end of the first lunar month, Mount Dibing was like a huge construction site. Countless construction machines were busy from the mountain to the foot of the mountain, repairing the barren mountain that had become a piece of white land day and night. Wang Xianxia walked on the huge construction site, supervising the work in person. Occasionally, when he encountered something that needed help, he would give a hand. The construction site was too big, so there were many things that needed help. In less than a morning, Wang Xianxia was covered with dust. He sat on a stone block to rest. A worker beside him wiped the dust off his hands and handed him a bottle of water. Wang Xianxia smiled and thanked him. He took the water and took a sip. Looking at the shape of some palaces in the distance, he was silent. Half a month ago, the Wang family of Beihai had officially announced the expulsion of Dijiang. The Kanglin River Jiang family also said that they would remove Dijiang from the family tree. All of this was proposed by Wang Xianxia. When he didn't feel too much pressure, he directly abandoned the most trustworthy superior of the invincible realm. Wang Xianxia personally escorted Dijiang to Beihai prison. As soon as he came back, the Wang family of Beihai officially announced Wang Xianxia as the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. He was not an acting patriarch like Dijiang. He completely replaced Wang Tianzong and became the official patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, as well as the supreme ruler of Beihai province. This year, Wang Xianxia was just 26 years old. In the face of this young new patriarch, all the people of Beihai were supporting him. In the praise, Dijiang seemed to become the abyss of Beihai province. Innumerable curses and dirty water were poured on Dijiang. First, Li Tianlan swept all the way from autumn water to Mount Dibing. Then, the mysterious chosen one destroyed everything on Mount Dibing with a sword. For the people of Beihai who had the highest sense of honor and belonging, all of this seemed to be because of Dijiang's cowardice at the beginning. Most people thought that he was a coward for taking the initiative to withdraw the Internal Defense Force and the Heaven Punishment Troop in the face of Li Tianlan. If it weren't for this matter, the powerful Wang family of Beihai wouldn't be treated as a coward and bullied casually. More curses followed. The rumor that there was a deal between Dijiang and Emperor Dong's palace on Mount Dibing reached the ears of ordinary people in Beihai. As a result, the curses of those with ulterior motives, those who attempted to usurp the throne, and those with wild ambitions rang out in every corner of the North Sea. In the shortest time, Dijiang, who used to be a student of Sword Emperor and had incomparable glory in Mount Dibing, was completely discredited. Wang Xianxia had been silent about this. From the beginning to the end, he had never said a word for Dijiang. Even when some of the media directly controlled by them led the public opinion to push all the blame on Dijiang, Wang Xianxia also acquiesced. His silence and his proposal to expel Dijiang had been widely praised and respected in North Sea. When most of the people focused their attention on spurning Dijiang, no one paid attention to Wang Xianxia's age. Even because of what he did to eradicate the cancer, for Beihai, he naturally gained a lot of support. Even Wang Qinglei temporarily fell silent within the Wang family of Beihai. Everyone was paying attention to the movements of the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. But since he became the official patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, the only order he issued was to repair Mount Dibing. Apart from that, there was no other action. Silence. For a moment, the entire Mount Dibing became silent. Wang Xianxiao's silence directly caused the internal turmoil of the Southeast Group. Wang Qinglei, who was in Wuxia, frequently took action. He met with some backbone figures in the group, won over people's hearts, and further raised his status. 10 days ago, he personally went to Yuzhou to meet Li Huaqing. The Zhongzhou State Parliament, which had been silent for a while, also began to react after going to Yuzhou to meet Li Huaqing. A tentative investigation team began to enter North Sea. Wang Xianxia still didn't say anything. He just told the provincial government of Beihai to entertain the investigation team well. So another investigation team entered North Sea. Wang Xianxiao's order was still to entertain them well. The Zhongzhou State Parliament was completely relieved. In the beginning, no one thought that the Wang family of Beihai would always give in. Especially after being attacked by the mysterious expert, the parliament didn't see the opportunity to beat the dog when it was down. Instead, they smelled a touch of danger. They might not know the mysterious chosen one, but they knew enough about the Wang family of Beihai. As the family with the deepest foundation in the dark world, after a series of recent blows, no one believed that the Wang family of Beihai could bear it. They would definitely rebound completely. If they couldn't find the mysterious chosen one, all the counterattacks would probably fall on the academics and the prince group. In such a situation, Wang Qinglei's attitude would even be on the side of the Wang family of Beihai. So the two groups were nervously on guard. But Wang Xianxiao kept silent. After Wang Qinglei officially showed his attitude, Zhongzhou State finally let go of some scruples and began to test him constantly. Wang Xianxiao made concessions again and again in the face of the test, which made people feel that he was too young to handle the situation and was ready to compromise. So all kinds of investigation teams began to enter the Wang family of Beihai and were ready to take action against countless core projects in North Sea. Some of the potential allies of the Wang family of Beihai also showed signs of wavering. 3 listed companies affiliated with the Wang family of Beihai and based in Zhongzhou State began to be suppressed, and their stocks were secretly acquired. Some reports against the officials of the provincial government of Beihai began to fly to the Ministry of Supervision of Yuzhou like snowflakes, and some of the support that Zhongzhou State had provided to Beihai on a regular basis also began to be released. Countless news gathered on Wang Xianxiao's desk every day, and all of them were bad news. The suppression suddenly came from all sides. All of this was because of Wang Xianxiao's young age. Because of summer solstice's serious injury. It was also because of Wang Qinglei's positive attitude. In the face of the storm that gradually swept through the Wang family of Beihai, all Wang Xianxiao could do seemed to be silent. A plump and enchanting figure slowly walked into the construction site and came to Wang Xianxiao. She whispered, "Patriarch, Madam is calling you." The enchantress from the Wang family of Beihai. Now the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy had passed the initial selection, but there was still some time before the new class began. During this time, the enchantress had been in Beihai province. "Oh, okay." Wang Xianxiao drank some water, stood up and said casually, "Sixth sister, has my mother taken medicine?" "She has." "Madam's recent injury is more stable." The enchantress whispered, and there was some relief in her eyes. A smile appeared in Wang Xianxiao's eyes. This might be the only good news for the Wang family of Beihai during this time. The night before the mysterious chosen one attacked Mount Dibing, summer solstice saw countless sword lights in the sky. Countless vitality on Mount Dibing gathered into her body. The injuries that had troubled her for many years were mostly healed overnight, and her completely broken foundation seemed to have the possibility to heal. However, her body, which had just mostly recovered, was seriously injured by the mysterious chosen one's sword again. Summer solstice's injury was extremely serious, but it could still be regarded as good news. Because countless vitality was still playing a role, as long as her injury was healed this time, she had the possibility to return to her peak state. Summer solstice temporarily lived in a side hall of Mount Dibing. In front of the side hall was a path that led to the foot of the mountain. The path had been temporarily repaired, and it looked very smooth. When Wang Xianxiao came over, there were already several cars parked in front of the side hall. Several elites of the internal security force were putting some simple luggage on the cars. Wang Xianxiao glanced at them, said nothing and went straight in. Summer Solstice sat on the sofa in the living room, dressed neatly, but her face was as pale as paper. Tang Shi and Song Ci were chatting with their mother-in-law. Song Si's abdomen was obviously bulging, and her mood seemed to be fragile because of pregnancy. Her big eyes were red and swollen, and it seemed that she had just cried. "What's wrong?" Wang Xianxia glanced at Song Si and said with some concern, "Are you uncomfortable?" Song Si shook her head and said nothing. "This silly child doesn't want to leave." "He wants to stay with you," Summer Solstice said softly. Her injury was extremely serious, but it did not hinder her movement. But when she spoke, she was obviously a little out of breath. Song Si looked at Wang Xianxia with some expectation in her eyes. Wang Xianxia was silent for a while, then shook his head and said, "No. You have to leave for a while today." "How long?" Song Si asked softly with a trembling voice. "It won't be long." Wang Xianxia smiled and said, "When I stabilize the situation of the Wang family of Beihai, I will take you back. But the child is about to be born. I don't want to see you when the child is born." Song Si's voice was hoarse. The gender of the child in her belly had been checked. It was a boy. After a long discussion with Wang Xianxiao, they decided to name it Haoqin. Song Si was very looking forward to the child's future, but Wang Xianxiao was very determined to send them away. Song Si had mixed feelings. Thinking of the long separation, she felt a little wronged and even more humiliated. She was the woman of the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. When would she leave Mount Dibing to take refuge? "I will be with you when I have time," Wang Xianxiao whispered. "I heard that you have withdrawn the people you sent out to look for her?" Summer Solstice changed the topic and whispered. Wang Xianxiao nodded. Summer Solstice looked into her son's eyes and asked, "Because it's not necessary. In the current situation, it's better if we can't find my sister. If we can't find her, no one can. The Wang family of Beihai can't help her for the time being. In this case, it's better to let it go." Wang Xianxiao was silent for a while and whispered, "It's said that Emperor Dong's palace is also looking for her. If they find my sister, it's better. At least in Emperor Dong's palace, she won't be hurt." Song Si took a deep look at him. She still wanted to say something, but Wang Xianxiao's cell phone suddenly rang. He took out his cell phone and glanced at the number. His eyes slightly narrowed. "Jingxin." The phone was connected. Wang Xianxiao's voice was very calm. "Xianxiao, I handed in the materials." On the other end of the phone, the voice of speaker Wang Jingxin of Lin, and was steady. Wang Xianxiao's eyes suddenly lit up for a moment, and he said in a low voice, "He agreed." "Yes, in the past half a month, we have communicated 6 times. Just now was the 6th time. He took the initiative to find me and accepted our conditions." Wang Xianxiao took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. At this moment, a kind of extremely violent killing intent gradually emanated from his body. The temperature of the whole hall seemed to become cold. Chapter 753. Throughout the hundreds of years of history of the Wang family of Beihai, this period of time could be regarded as their most difficult period. They had experienced ups and downs, and there had been a large-scale change of blood. But it was the first time that they had encountered internal and external troubles, and they had lost their highest combat power. The Southeast Group, which had always been centered on the Wang family of Beihai, also suffered great pressure when the situation in Beihai was turbulent. In the past 6 months, with the continuous moves of the academics and the giant group, some of the peripheral forces of the group had obviously begun to waver, and their attitudes had become ambiguous. Especially during this period, as Wang Qinglei kept talking to some of the backbone forces inside the group, some different voices began to appear among the most important forces inside the Southeast Group. The situation was changing every day. For the Southeast Group, it was getting worse and worse. The 2 directors and several counselors of the Southeast Group all received calls from the feudal officials below. There were a lot of probing in their words, but the leaders of the Southeast Group didn't reveal anything. Mount Dibing was silent. The leaders at the top level of the Southeast Group were also silent. But in secret, the leaders had communicated with each other and even argued several times. And during this period, the Southeast Group made more and more concessions to the Parliament of Zhongzhou State, especially in the military field. When everyone thought that Di Jiang's resignation as the commander of the Border Control Corps and Dongqing Wudi's return to this position was the greatest show of goodwill of the Wang family of Beihai to the giant group, a few days later, everyone found that all this was just the beginning. In just half a month, the navy of Zhongzhou State was extremely turbulent. General Nan, the deputy commander of the navy, who was promoted by Dongqing Wudi, officially became the commander of the navy of Zhongzhou State a week ago. And 3 days ago, the two trump card armies that had been controlled by the Southeast Group also changed hands and were replaced by capable generals who had served as high-level officers in the Border Control Corps. It was said that the Wang family of Beihai had begun to take action against the position of the Secretary General of the Army Headquarters. Although this position had been held by the Special Warfare Group, the Southeast Group and Dongqing Wudi had reached an agreement and decided to promote Bai Qingzhao to the position. If there was no accident, Bai Qingzhao was likely to be promoted in the near future, and he might even become the new counselor of Zhongzhou State at the end of the year. However, as a condition, Bai Zhanfeng, the speaker of Yuzhou, seemed to have to step down. Changing the blood, shuffling the cards, centralizing power. Countless fields in Zhongzhou State were in turmoil. Being in it, one could really feel the changes and the magnificence of the situation every day. In the countless changes, a figure of the Southeast Group, who had always been low-key and gentle but had never been ignored by anyone, was becoming more and more prominent in the ever-changing storm. It seemed abrupt, but it was natural for him to walk to the front of the Southeast Group. Military god Yi Dongxing. Most of the transactions between the army headquarters and the giant group were presided over by Yi Dongxing. Not only did they compromise with the giant group, but the academics and the prince group also gained a lot from the changes. However, such frequent personnel changes did not cause any disturbance in the military from beginning to end. It was not until then that people realized how terrifying the influence of the god of war was in the military. As a result, the dispute among the executives of the Southeast Group became more and more intense. Even Wang Qinglei's position became a little awkward. Yi Dongxing did not respond to this directly. He just carried out his plan step by step. He went to the front, showed his means, and persuaded Dongqing Wudi. In nearly a week, he had walked into Dongqing Wudi's office to report work for the 4th time. As the most qualified and capital deputy minister in the army headquarters to check and balance Dongqing Wudi, his recent performance had attracted more and more people's attention. Yi Dongxing did not care about this. What he cared about was the result. Now, after more than 2 hours of communication for the 4th time, Yi Dongxing finally got the result he wanted. When is Wang Jingxin going to do it? Dongqing Wudi smoked the last cigarette in the large office, looked up at Yi Dongxing and said in a calm tone, "I can do it at any time." Yi Dongxing said slowly. With Dongqing Wudi's clear statement, his spirit seemed to be completely relaxed. In this case, hurry up. I have a lot of different opinions on this matter. You've really forced me into a corner this time. Dongqing Wudi shook his head with a smile, picked up the teacup, and drank some water. For the first time since the two worked together in the army headquarters, the atmosphere was so harmonious. Beihai and the Southeast Group are very sincere. Minister, believe me, a stable situation for us is good for you and His Highness Li Tianlan. Yi Dongxing said softly. That's true, but it's a taboo in officialdom after all. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while, shook his head, and did not say much. What they would do next was to blatantly break the rules. Although there was no fighting or killing, the far-reaching impact was even more serious than Li Tianlan's direct killing of Qi Mulin. However, Yi Dongxing and the Wang family of Beihai also gave very rich returns. Dongqing Wudi hesitated for several days and communicated with the big shots of the giant group many times before he decided to agree. It's just a little taboo. We are the ones who do the work. If you don't agree, Wang Jingxin will not dare to do it. Yi Dongxing's tone was extremely frank. Dongqing Wudi was stunned and narrowed his eyes at Yi Dongxing. He was not surprised by the current situation. The Wang family of Beihai could not do anything alone. Because of Li Tianlan, the giant group had become their best ally, so even if they had to pay a high price, they had to make Dongqing Wudi completely consistent with them. The storm that Wang Jingxin was about to set off in Xianxia was a piece of candy that the Wang family of Beihai gave to the giant group, but it also violated a political taboo. This piece of candy was undoubtedly very sweet. As long as Dongqing Wudi agreed, he had to maintain this result with the Wang family of Beihai. In that special situation, no one could maintain it alone. To be exact, as long as Dongqing Wudi agreed, the giant group would be completely on their side. With a backer and an ally, the Wang family of Beihai could have more confidence in the next blood change. Dongqing Wudi knew this very well, but he knew that the meaning was completely different from what Yi Dongxing said directly. Yi Dongxing looked at Dongqing Wudi and nodded slightly, his eyes clear. He did not know why. This was the craziest plan that Wang Xingshiao had put forward since he became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. The degree of compromise with the giant group came from Summer Solstice's instructions. As Yi Dongxing said, Summer Solstice was indeed very sincere. It seemed that after the mysterious chosen one attacked Mount Dibing, Summer Solstice, who was seriously injured, had changed. She gave up some things that she once wanted to hold on to and began to become calmer, more low-key, and more pragmatic. Have you been under a lot of pressure recently? Dongqing Wudi took out another cigarette and lit it. He asked casually, Jianghuai seems to be very lively. Yi Dongxing's expression darkened for a moment. He frowned and then smiled bitterly. The problem of Jianghuai had become a problem that the whole Zhongzhou state was paying attention to. The result here also directly determined the Zhongzhou state parliament's next action against the Wang family of Beihai. Dongqing Wudi would naturally notice it. The situation is out of control? Dongqing Wudi looked at Yi Dongxing's expression and asked slowly. It's not that bad, but this beginning has a very bad influence. Yi Dongxing said slowly. Dongqing Wudi nodded. Jianghuai province was one of the core back gardens of the southeast group. It bordered Wuyue and was deeply influenced by Wuyue. The speaker and the governor of Jianghuai had always been very close to Wang Qinglei. This relationship was nothing before. But in recent days, Wang Qinglei visited Jianghuai, and then the speaker and the governor of Xianxia expressed their support for Wang Qinglei on different occasions. It could be said that they had officially shown their attitude and started to fight. This was undoubtedly the first step of Wang Qinglei's plan to conquer the southeast. Wuyue was firmly controlled by him. Xianxia now belonged to the Li family and the giant group. At that time, the foundation of the group and the Wang family of Beihai would face an extremely difficult situation. And the cause of all this was that Yi Dongxing's recent high-profile actions made Wang Qinglei feel uneasy. The Navy big shot replaced by General Nan was a close friend of Wang Qinglei. This alone was enough to make Speaker Wuyue feel threatened, so his means became more and more aggressive. Yi Dongxing came from the army headquarters, and Wang Qinglei was in Wuyue. The two of them, who minded their own business, now seemed to have become the most direct competitors within the Southeast Group. As a result, the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group had to adjust their plans and directions for the next few decades, and their own strength would inevitably shrink to a certain extent. This was also the reason why the giant group and even the academics could accept it. However, before the result of Jianghuai was clear, Yi Dongxing was destined to bear great pressure. Both of them stopped talking and smoked in silence, deep in thought. They had talked about what should be talked about. The next step was to wait. Waiting for the rainstorm. The shrill ringing of the phone suddenly rang in the office. The two people in the office were shocked at the same time and looked at each other. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath and looked serious. He picked up the confidential phone in front of him. Okay, I got it. He said to the phone and hung up. Let's go. His voice was low and calm. The council is holding an emergency meeting. Yi Dongxing took a deep breath and subconsciously clenched his fists. Wang Jing was moved. The two looked at each other and walked out of the office one after the other. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on the 29th day of the first lunar month in Zhongzhou State. Just after the New Year. The entire Zhongzhou State and the entire Beihai suddenly welcomed an extremely violent rainstorm. The Ministry of Supervision, the Parliament, the Cabinet, and nearly 6 departments of Zhongzhou State received a report from Xianxia at the same time. Report Su Xinghe, the Speaker of Xianxia. and the informant was the speaker of Lin and Wang Jingxin. A large amount of evidence appeared on the council's desk at the same time. In the face of numerous ironclad evidences, the parliament reached a consensus in the shortest time. They asked the Ministry of Supervision of Xianxia to control Xianxia as soon as possible, and the Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State flew directly to Xianxia. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when the order was issued. It was sunny in Zhongzhou State. It was raining cats and dogs in Zhejiang. At 1:45 p.m., the Ministry of Personnel of Zhongzhou State directly issued a document and spread it all over Zhongzhou State. Su Xingha's position as the chairman of Jiangxia Province was revoked. The governor of Jiangxia, Zhou Yuanshan, was appointed as the new chairman of Jiangxia. The transfer order of the Ministry of Personnel was sent to Huading at the same time. Dongqing Qiuqi was transferred to Huading as the speaker of Wudong New Area. She served as the deputy speaker of Jiangxia, the deputy governor of the provincial government, and the acting governor. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the torrential rain spread from Zhejiang to Jianghuai. The Jianghuai governor was transferred without any preparation. Chairman Wang Jingxin was transferred to Jianghuai as the governor. There was no sign or brewing. The violent wind and rain swept through Zhongzhou State. When everything seemed to have settled down, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The Wang family of Beihai, Mount Dibing. 2 cars had gone down the mountain one after another. Tangshi and Songxi's cars. Summer Solstice's cars. One after the other, they were getting farther and farther away. Wang Shengxiao stood on the stage of formidable person, watching the cars getting farther and farther away and finally disappearing. He took a deep breath, and his expression had become extremely calm. The enchantress stood quietly at the foot of the mountain, waiting for Wang Shengxiao's order. "Bring them," Wang Shengxiao's voice sounded. Before the thunder came, his voice sounded clear and cold on Mount Dibing. "Bring them all here." Chapter 754. At 3:10 in the afternoon, in the sanatorium, Saint received the news from Jianghuai and Jiangxia. As a new invincible realm expert in Zhongzhou State, although he was no longer the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters, he still had countless information channels. Mount Shu was also more powerful than before because of his existence. The message was sent to his mobile mailbox in the form of voice. It was extremely detailed, from the debate at the council meeting to the appointment, and which giants voted for and against. Everything was clearly stated. Saint looked down at his mobile phone. His eyes fell on the new governor of Jiangxia. The new governor of Jiangxia, Dongqing Qiuqi. Saint frowned tightly. He looked at the name and was silent for a long time. Dongqing Qiuqi was one of the directors of Huading. She had made excellent achievements in Wudong New Area. Among the senior officials at the deputy governor level in Zhongzhou State, and because she was a woman, her personal qualifications and abilities were outstanding. She had been in Wudong New Area for several years. It might be a little unusual for her to be the governor of Jiangxia, but it was not completely unreasonable. But what she should not have done the most was to be the governor of Jiangxia. Dongqing Qiuqi was Dongqing Wudi's daughter. Furthermore, Dongqing Qiuqi was Zhou Yuanshan's wife. Now her husband was the speaker of Jiangxia, and his wife was the governor. The first and second leaders of a province in the southeast were husband and wife. What was this? There had never been such a situation in the hundreds of years since the founding of Zhongzhou State. It had never happened before, and it would never happen in the future. It was simply absurd. And how many deals had been made in the process of causing this absurd result? Saint was a little annoyed. He was the purest swordsman, especially when Wang Tianzong's whereabouts were unknown. He could even be said to be the #1 swordsman in Zhongzhou State today. He had been dealing with swords all his life, so he could not understand the ups and downs of the top management most of the time. But even as an outsider, he could still perceive that it was inappropriate through this appointment. So what was Dongqing Wudi thinking? Sending his daughter and son-in-law to Jiangxia as the first and second leaders was tantamount to committing a big taboo. If there was really a problem, no matter which one of them had a problem, the other could not escape. Saint could see the danger, so how could Dongqing Wudi not know? Even if the giant group really wanted to take over Xianxia by force, Dongqing Qiuqi didn't have to go there. Zhou Yuanshan's ability was enough to stabilize the situation. To say the least, even if the giant group liked the position of governor, there were other candidates in the large group besides Dongqing Qiuqi. Why did he do that? Saint closed the mailbox, thought for a moment, and dialed a number. The call was hung up. The next second, the big screen on the wall of the sanatorium office lit up. Saint picked it up casually, looked at military counselor who appeared on the screen, and nodded, but said nothing. With military counselor's status in Zhongzhou state, he might get the news much earlier than Saint. Although he had the strength of a top half-step invincible realm expert, he was not a pure warrior to some extent. Military counselor, the code name was enough to show his position in Samsara Palace. Saint could be sure that he would get the information faster and more detailed than him. Even the series of things that happened today were the result of military counselor's secret promotion. Have you eaten? Military counselor greeted him lazily. His face was a little red, and he looked sleepy. I had a dinner party at noon, so I drank a little more. I just got up. Military counselor rubbed his forehead and yawned. Do the things in Xianxia have anything to do with you? Saint asked. A little. Military counselor nodded and said calmly. But why did you do that? Saint stared at military counselor in the video, and his eyes were solemn. Dongqing Qiuqi and Zhou Yuanshan are in the same province. There may be big problems. The giant group. When did you get used to thinking about problems from the standpoint of the giant group? Military counselor said in a strange tone. Saint suddenly froze. Dongqing Wudi is probably going to be set up by the Wang family of Beihai this time. But on the whole, it's not a bad thing. I have some friends in the giant group, but many of them don't like me. I don't care what they do, and I'm not obliged to be responsible for them. Before I retire, I will only think about problems from the standpoint of Tianlan. Tianlan and the giant group, neither of them represents the other. I don't see how it's good for the palace master to do so much. Saint's tone was calm, but everyone could hear the difference in his tone. In front of Li Tianlan, Saint and military counselor basically called each other the same way, calling him Your Highness. But when Li Tianlan was not there, military counselor directly called him by his name, while Saint called him Palace Master. Obviously, no matter what happened in the future, Saint would stay in Samsara Palace. As for military counselor, Flaming Fire, who had left at the beginning and perhaps many others, they would choose to help Li Tianlan once and quietly retire after completing their missions. Military counselor took a deep look at him and said softly, That's because you don't know the information. I may not know, but do you think the giant group doesn't know? Dongqing Wudi is in charge of the army headquarters. Will he be set up by the Wang family of Beihai? Saint asked faintly. Oh, the giant group, Dongqing Wudi? Dongqing Wudi knows some information, but the giant group may not. All this information was suppressed by Dongqing Wudi. Judging from the result this time, Dongqing Wudi was indeed set up once, but he did it willingly. Military counselor chuckled. Make it clear. Saint was a little confused. The motion to transfer Dongqing Qiuqi has been going on for a while. The original intention of the giant group was to transfer Dongqing Qiuqi back to Zhongyuan to serve as the governor of Zhongyuan province, and transferring her to Xianxia happened recently. At first, Wang Jingxin communicated with Zhou Yuanshan, and then Yi Dongxing communicated with Dongqing Wudi. The reason is very simple. The Wang family of Beihai is in a bad situation now, and Xianxia must be given up. Wang Qinglei is ambitious, and the situation in Jianghuai is unstable. At this time, Wang Jingxin, the trump card that has been cultivated for a long time, can play a great role. Military counselor's tone was calm. So the Wang family of Beihai gave up Dijiang, Su Xinghe, and many things that could cause trouble. They tried their best to stabilize the internal situation of the Wang family of Beihai. At the same time, they gave up Xianxia and used Wang Jingxin to go to Jianghuai to withstand the situation in Jianghuai. This is also a test for him, and it also strengthens the relationship with the giant group. Go on. Saint narrowed his eyes, and his eyes flickered. It's very obvious that the Wang family of Beihai wants to advance and retreat together with the giant group. The recent deal with the military also shows this. They need to reshuffle internally, and they also need to face the parliament. They must win over a strong enough ally. Pushing Dongcheng Qiuqi to Xianxia is a move to ensure the position of the giant group. It's too sensitive to put Dongcheng Qiuqi and Zhou Yuanshan together. But since this transfer has become a fact, they won't move in a short time. If they move, it will have a great negative impact on them, and the giant group can't afford such a loss. So the two groups jointly put them in Xianxia, and they must work together to maintain the current situation. So in a short time, the cooperation between the two groups can't be reversed. Saint nodded. I can understand the idea of the Wang family of Beihai, but why did the giant group agree? Yes. To be exact, it was Dongqing Wudi who agreed. Military counselor's tone was a little unfathomable. Do you know the result of the meeting of the decision-making committee just now? Zhou Yuanshan's appointment was approved by a unanimous vote, and Dongqing Qiuqi's voting result was very interesting. Among the 6 groups in Zhongzhou State, there were people in each group who agreed with Dongqing Qiuqi's transfer, and there were people in each group who opposed it. Yi Dongxing voted for it, Wang Qinglei opposed it, Dongqing Wudi voted for it, and Zhou Mulin opposed it. There were different voices within each group. Part of it is because of me, including Dongqing Wudi's promise to mobilize Dongqing Qiuqi. I also have my reasons. Saint's body shook slightly. You went to see Dongqing Wudi? Not only Dongqing Wudi, but I also went to visit Bai Zhanfeng. Saint said slowly. What identity did you go with? Saint's tone was solemn. That's my current face. I used the identity of military counselor. Military counselor laughed. Saint didn't speak for a long time. Military counselor wore a black cloak most of the time, and no one in Zhongzhou State knew who he was. Now that he confessed his identity with his original face, it was impossible for Bai Zhanfeng and Dongqing Wudi not to be shocked. What did you talk to him about? Saint couldn't help asking. Dongqing Wudi didn't approve of such a deal at first, but I provided some information about the Wang family of Beihai, so Dongqing Wudi nodded and agreed. He was willing to let the giant group be set up by the Wang family of Beihai. Military counselor said meaningfully, do you really think that only the Wang family of Beihai needs to reshuffle? The giant group, the loosest of the 6 groups, also needs to be reshuffled. Although the need is not as urgent as that of the Wang family of Beihai, once it starts, it will be more thorough. The Dongqing clan has been seeking change for many years. Now the time is ripe, and it's time to take action. Tianlong can't represent the giant group, and the giant group can't represent Tianlong. Do you think this situation is normal? At least Dongqing Wudi doesn't think it's normal. Li Tianlong has been cultivated as the core of the giant group from the very beginning, and his status is even higher than Zhou Yuanshan's. Now the giant group seems to be unified, but that's because Eastern Europe has provided endless benefits to the giant group. Dongqing Wudi has long wanted to change this situation. Military counselor said softly. In that case, why didn't Dongqing Wudi agree to the Wang family of Beihai's request at the beginning? Saint asked. Because Dongqing Wudi underestimated Wang Shengxiao at the beginning and didn't know his determination. Military counselor smiled. I told him, and he naturally had no scruples. Saint looked at the screen and was silent for a long time. If that's the case, he muttered, the strength of the giant group may shrink significantly. But the cohesion of the core will not change. Military counselor said blandly, and it's not necessarily the giant group. Maybe it's the Donghuang group? As for the shrinking strength you mentioned, do you really think that the trump card in my hand is useless after so many years of operating in Zhongzhou State? Saint took a deep look at him and said coldly, Are you so impatient? I'm too tired these years. It's time for me to retire. Military counselor looked at him and smiled sincerely, but there was some interest in his eyes. When the situation is clearer, I should go to the desert and have a showdown with Thunlun. Saint said no more. He silently hung up the phone and looked out of the window at the sky. Under the storm, an undercurrent that was enough to change the future pattern of Zhongzhou State had surged. Obviously, except for Dongqing Wudi, no one in Zhongzhou state seemed to be aware of this undercurrent. Chapter 755. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Kanglin City, Beihai. A luxury bus slowly drove into the No. 0 Air Force Base in Beihai Province. The No. 0 Air Force Base was the largest Air Force base of the Beihai Corps. It was built in Kanglin City, the center of Beihai. It could be said to be the most high-end Air Force in the entire Beihai. There were more than 200 fighter jets and hundreds of armed helicopters inside. In terms of technical content, most of them were at the world's first-class level. Some of the fighter jets jointly developed by Beihai, Zhongzhou State, and Europe were even at the world's top level. The entire No. 0 Air Force Base could be said to be the biggest trump card to ensure air supremacy in Beihai Province. The luxury bus slowly stopped in the center of the base. A middle-aged fat man who took the lead slowly got off the bus and glanced around the airport with majestic eyes. The sunshine in Beihai was just right. The afternoon sun shone on the planes in the base, shining with a gloomy luster. The roar of helicopter rotors and the roar of fighter jets rang from time to time. Fighter jets swooped down and heavily armed helicopters slowly took off. A large number of soldiers in the base were busy doing daily maintenance. A major general of the Beihai Corps stood in front of the bus and looked at the fat man in front of him. His eyes were cold and he said calmly, "Hello, Director Liu." The middle-aged fat man with a ruddy face snorted softly. He ignored the major general's outstretched palm and said with a fake smile, "Are you in charge of the Air Force of the Beihai Corps?" "I'm in charge of this No. 0 Air Force." The major general narrowed his eyes, withdrew his palm, and said, "General Wang, you can't meet Director Liu because of a temporary matter. He asked me to apologize on his behalf." The fat man's face darkened for a moment, and he said sarcastically, "General Wang is really arrogant." Not only him, but more than a dozen men and women behind him also looked unhappy. The major general twitched the corner of his mouth, clenched his fists, and didn't speak. Wang Yu was the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps and the commander of the Air Force. He was in charge of all the air forces of the Beihai Corps and had the rank of general. Usually he was like Director Liu. Who dared to speak ill of Wang Yu behind his back, let alone in front of him? Did the Wang family of Beihai really have the guts to step on them now? The major general took a deep breath and looked at the unhappy faces in front of him. He gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, "Director Liu, please. I have nothing to say to you." With a straight face, the fatty said in a gloomy tone, "Can you represent the North Sea Air Force on some matters? I don't care what Wang Yu is busy with. Tell him to come see me immediately. I can't talk to you." The major general raised his head and looked straight at Fatty. Fatty raised his eyebrows. "What are you looking at?" "I'm here on behalf of the Central Continent. I'm here to patrol Section 0 and want to meet the chief commander of your Air Force." "But is it too much?" "That's right. You're just a major general. Our director has written a lot of reports to communicate with Wang Yu. Can you make the decision on these matters?" The men and women behind Fatty were all talking at once. They came from the equipment department of Zhongzhou State's military and were the first inspection team sent by Zhongzhou State to patrol Beihai. Fatty was a director of the General Armament Department and had the rank of colonel. If it was in the past, he naturally wouldn't dare to be presumptuous when he came to Beihai. But now, Beihai was in a precarious situation. As imperial envoys, who wouldn't want to step on them? This was a job where he could casually make some money. Fatty had been in Beihai for a few days and had visited 3 bases. He hadn't even expressed his stance, yet he had already made a 6-figure sum. Today, he had made up his mind to meet Wang Yu and take a big cut, but in the end, the other party wasn't coming. Fatty was extremely dissatisfied. Did the North Sea Air Force really think that he couldn't deal with them? That's right. Master and General Wang Yu talked about important matters. Can you represent Wang Yu? Humph, Director, it seems that the Beihai Corps isn't very cooperative. If you want me to read our report, I have to think carefully. In my opinion, the maintenance of these fighter jets in the base is very poor. I suggest that we send all these fighter jets to Yuzhou and properly maintain them. A young woman in her 30s smiled and gave her suggestion in a low voice. After finishing the report, she served the director on the big bed with another female colleague who had just joined the work. This was the director's original words to them. At this time, she felt that it was a good way to add insult to injury. Fatty's expression became more and more dignified. He stared at the Major General and said coldly, "I think so too. These fighter jets should be sent back to Yuzhou for proper maintenance." "Major General, are you sure that I want to write this in the report?" The Major General's face turned red. He gritted his teeth and said coldly, "Director Liu, we strictly implement the maintenance of these fighter jets. You've only been here for a few minutes. You haven't investigated at all." "Who said that we haven't investigated? We've already investigated, and all of our colleagues can testify. All of us will sign the director's investigation report. Our conclusions can stand up to scrutiny and have been carefully investigated." A young woman stepped forward and was almost plastered onto the fatty's body as she spoke in a menacing voice. The fatty was becoming more and more impatient. "Is Wang Yu coming or not? Call him right now. You can't bear this kind of responsibility." The call hadn't been made yet. The phone was already ringing. The Major General picked up the phone and looked at it. His expression changed, and he reflexively straightened his back after picking up the call. "Commander!" The fatty's eyes lit up and a sinister smile appeared on his oily face. "Is this Wang Yu? Give me the phone, I'll talk to him." The Major General looked at him with a peculiar expression. "Commander, are you sure?" "All right." He nodded and slowly exhaled before a sinister smile appeared on his face. "I understand." "What do you understand?" "I told you to give me the phone. I'll talk to Wang Yu." The fatty extended his chubby hand. "Gotcha." In the fierce scream, the Major General grabbed the fatty's palm and suddenly broke it. With the crisp sound of bones breaking, the fatty's fat body directly knelt down and screamed. The Major General's knee directly hit the fatty's chin. Blood and teeth flew out of his mouth, and his scream suddenly turned into a whimper. "What are you doing?" The young woman and the young woman exclaimed at the same time and subconsciously rushed forward. "Sup, sup." In the crisp sound, the Major General's face became as cold as ice, and two slaps directly sent the two women flying to the side. The soldiers at the Air Force base next to them were about to move at once. In the neat footsteps, a large number of soldiers began to charge. The originally arrogant inspection team was all stunned. Looking at the Major General's epaulets and the soldiers rushing over, everyone's bodies were trembling slightly. At this time, the Major General's epaulets seemed to suddenly become extremely majestic in their eyes. General, what do you want to do?" "Listen carefully." The Major General took 2 steps forward, pulled up the fatty, who was sobbing in a cold sweat, and threw him to the soldiers. "My name is Jiang Cheng, the commander of the No. 0 Air Force Base, the Major General of the Beihai Corps. If you can go back, write a report. Remember, my name is Jiang Cheng." His eyes swept over everyone in the inspection team, and he said coldly, "Tie them up and send them to Mount Dibbing. The Patriarch wants to see them." "Patriarch? Wang Xianxia?" Everyone's heart shook. Wang Yu didn't come. What did Wang Xianxia want to see them for? Buzz. An ear-piercing alarm rang throughout the base without warning. Countless signal lights were shining in the base. The next moment, all the soldiers in the base moved. In the sight of the inspection team, all the fighter jets took off, and the roaring helicopters were densely packed. An indescribable iron-blooded and resolute aura emanated from Jiang Cheng's eyes. He looked at the inspection team in front of him as if he were looking at a dead man. The fatty's face was pale, his legs trembled, and he directly peed his pants. He knew what the scene in front of him meant. This was a war alarm. A war alarm of the highest level. The moment the alarm sounded, it meant one thing. The entire No. 0 base, even the entire Beihai, would completely enter a state of war at this moment. "General, please enter the command room immediately. General Wang Yu is waiting for you for a meeting." A soldier raised his hand to salute, and his voice was calm and solemn. "Okay, I'll go right away." Jiang Cheng nodded, glanced at the horrified inspection team, and sneered, "Send them to Mount Dibbing." The ferocious soldiers rushed over and bound their bodies before tossing them onto the plain one after another. Some of them fell in the wrong position, so they were kicked to the side. All of the members of the inspection team were trembling in silence. In that instant, everyone could sense the astonishing hostility emanating from the bodies of the North Sea Legion soldiers. It was like the most extreme outbreak after a long time of holding back. The fatty, whose palm was broken, was sweating all over his body. He didn't know if all this had anything to do with the inspection team, but he had a hunch that he might have made a mistake. A big mistake. The plane took off in his panic and flew to Xianxia City. Through the window, the members of the inspection team looked at the land outside. Countless airplanes were taking off outside the window, and inside the base, countless soldiers were loading ammunition. The huge muzzles of the cannons were slowly rotating as they got into operation. Further away, from the Kanglin River to the North Sea, warships were gathering one after another. A huge object was faintly discernible in the sea, turning into a blurry silhouette. Countless bee stinger fighters, which were smaller than normal fighters but faster, roared in the air and finally landed on the behemoth in the sea. That was the aircraft carrier of Beihai. The code name was City on Sea. Autumn Water, Floating Island, Queen City, Port of Tongtian. Everyone was moving. More than 200,000 troops of the Beihai Corps were completely surging at this moment. All kinds of troops, including the sea, land, and air, were constantly gathering. The fatty was obviously not the first, and there was no special enemy. 15 inspection teams were arrested almost at the same time. Then, they got on the plane and flew to Mount Dibbing. Some unfinished reports were also gathered at Mount Dibbing. The fatty's report was not the most intense. In his report, he said that the maintenance of the Wang family of Beihai's air force was extremely perfunctory. He suggested that Xianxia State transfer back all the fighters of the Wang family of Beihai for maintenance. Of course, there was no need to return to Beihai after the maintenance. But there was more than one report that was even more outrageous. Some inspection teams thought that the senior management of the Beihai Corps had committed serious malfeasance. Some inspection teams thought that many enterprises of the Wang family of Beihai were destroying the interests of Xianxia State. Similarly, some inspection teams thought that the Beihai provincial government had been seriously overstaffed over the years. More than a dozen reports and more than a dozen suggestions, none of which was good. It was suggested to transfer back the fighters, withdraw the warships, cancel the cooperation with Beihai, and investigate the senior officials of the Beihai provincial government. At the same time, there was a proposal that directly asked Beihai to report all the nuclear warheads stored in Beihai province, and the base should be supervised by Xianxia State. It required Beihai to hand over the launch codes of the nuclear warheads and the permission of the Wang family of Beihai to use them. If this series of suggestions was really adopted, the entire Wang family of Beihai would completely lose control of Beihai province. In all aspects, the strength of the Wang family of Beihai would be seriously reduced, and it would become a first-line wealthy family in Xianxia State from the strongest wealthy family in the Dark World. Wang Xingxiao's silence seemed to make everyone misunderstand something. Therefore, the inspection teams completely looked down on the Wang family of Beihai, and their reports became more and more radical. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the night shrouded Mount Dibbing. Countless inspection teams were pushed to the top of Mount Dibbing. They walked up the steps leading to the stage of Formidable Person and looked at the figure standing beside the stone of Formidable Person. Wang Shengxiao turned his back to them and looked at Beihai in front of him. The waves were surging, and the huge waves slapped on Mount Dibbing, roaring incessantly. Wang Shengxiao, do you know what you are doing? Do you want to commit treason? I'm warning you, let us go immediately, and Beihai must hand over. An engineer of the inspection team who enjoyed the treatment of deputy governor said loudly. But before his voice died away, a sword light suddenly lit up in the darkness. The sword light kept splitting, and the dense sword energy enveloped the engineer's body. The incomparably shrill scream suddenly rang out. Blood was constantly splashing. Every piece of flesh and blood on the engineer's body was completely smashed by the sword light, and then the bones. The scream that made everyone's scalp numb lasted for 5 or 6 minutes before it completely disappeared. The engineer also disappeared, leaving only a pool of flesh and blood on the ground. Everyone was stunned. Countless people trembled and looked at the direction where the engineer disappeared, their faces pale. He really dared to kill people. How dare he kill people? How dare he kill the inspection team of Zhongzhou State? Wang Xianxia slowly turned around. The military satellite of Beihai shrouded Mount Dibing. At the same time, all the signals of the channels of Beihai province and the news channels of each city of Beihai were taken over by Mount Dibing. The same picture appeared on the TV of every household in Beihai and on the internet. It was the desolate Mount Dibing in the night, the sound of the vast waves of Beihai slapping on the stage of formidable person, and Wang Xianxiao's calm and gentle face under the lights. At this moment, countless ordinary people of Beihai were looking at the new ruler of Beihai. Their patriarch. I don't understand. Wang Xianxiao said slowly. He said with a slight smile in his voice, faint and calm, I don't understand why the Wang family of Beihai is so targeted. For many years, the Wang family of Beihai may have done a lot of wrong things, but in the face of the entire Zhongzhou state, we have a clear conscience. When you were aggressive, we were willing to bow our heads, but why were you unwilling to let us go? You, Lu Tan, director of the General Assembly Department, in the few days since you came to Beihai, we have given you more than 600,000 yuan. Please let us go. You took the money, but you didn't do anything. You took more than 2 million. Your report disappoints me. You, 3 million yuan. You, 800,000 yuan. I don't understand. How did Beihai offend you? More than 20 million people in Beihai just want to live a better life. Why are you targeting us? There was silence. At this moment, silence swept through Beihai province like a hurricane. Countless people waiting in front of the TV were silent. But they did not panic. Instead, everyone was extremely calm. And extremely determined. I can't figure it out, so I invited all of you here. I want all of you to help me think about it. I want everyone who can see me to think about how the Wang family of Beihai has wronged you all these years. His eyes were calm. He reached out and patted the stone of formidable person beside him. This is the history of the Wang family of Beihai. He said slowly, you cannot understand it, but it doesn't matter. Today, I will tell you bit by bit. Chapter 756. Beihai was surging. In the loud sound of the tide, lights lit up on Mount Dibing. Countless dazzling lights gathered on the top of the mountain. The members of the inspection team were exposed to the lights and the countless people of Beihai. Men and women, old and young. The members of the inspection team, who patrolled all areas of Beihai a few days ago, looked reserved and dignified, and felt that they were invincible in Beihai, were all pale and frightened. The uneasy feeling of danger was like the undulating tide under the stage of formidable person, surging and surging. Everyone began to tremble slightly. Wang Xianxiao stroked the stone of formidable person beside him. His eyes were so affectionate and firm. He was the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Before he became the patriarch, he had been here countless times. At that time, his invincible father stood in front of him. Standing here, he seemed to have completely suppressed the entire Beihai and overshadowed the glory of the stone of formidable person. But now, he was the patriarch. His parents were not here. He was the only one on the stage of formidable person. Countless lights shone on the stage of formidable person on the inspection team and on Wang Xianxiao. His face looked extremely pale under the light, but the hard lines on his face exuded unparalleled strength. In the light, he closed his eyes. The sound of the tide was endless. For the first time, he faced the stone of formidable person, which was carved with hundreds of years of history of the Wang family of Beihai, alone. He faced tens of millions of people of the Wang family of Beihai. It was not until this moment that he vaguely felt Wang Tianzong's original state of mind. At this moment, the entire Beihai province seemed to become quiet. However, an extremely crazy power was brewing in the seemingly peaceful situation. Chen Qianchong of the Chen clan, former chief of staff of the Army of Beihai Corps, Lieutenant General, graduated from the Beihai Military Academy. 15 years ago, he died on the border of Xianxia State in a joint operation between the Beihai Corps and the Border Control Corps. In that dispute, he formulated a strategy to withdraw more than 2,000 people of Xianxia State who were in danger in Annan State. In that battle, he finally retreated. When he died, he was less than 20 meters away from the boundary monument of Xianxia State. Wang Xiangxiao's palm casually swept across a name under the stone of formidable person. Beihai has never thought of separating from Xianxia State. But now, I want to say that he is a soldier of Beihai. Wang Dongshi is the biggest philanthropist in Xianxia State in the past 20 years. He once controlled the North Sea Angel Fund for 16 years and donated more than 200 billion yuan of materials to Xianxia State in total. The Angel Fund he founded is still a first-class charity fund in the world. I can say for sure that when he made contributions to Xianxia State, he never asked for any return. Xia Yu, the previous head of Beihai Biological Laboratory. She has worked for the Wang family of Beihai for more than 40 years. During this period, she has jointly developed more than 10 kinds of gene drugs with Xianxia State. You may not be very clear about joint research and development, but I can tell you now that the so-called joint research and development between Beihai and Xianxia State, in all fields, including biological drugs, military equipment, industrial machinery, and so on, is borne by the Wang family of Beihai. His voice was still gentle, without the slightest fluctuation. Now there are 963 names on the stone of formidable person, including the 500 years of history of the Wang family of Beihai. He looked ahead, and his eyes seemed to fall on everyone in the Wang family of Beihai through all the media channels in Beihai province. I don't want to say that the Wang family of Beihai is the biggest contributor to Xianxia State. It doesn't make sense. I don't deny that for many years, the Wang family of Beihai did get a lot of benefits from Xianxia State. But I don't think that Beihai reported little benefits to Xianxia State. In my opinion, it should be more. The image of the satellite was always stable on Wang Xiangxiao. At this moment, night fell on Beihai. On the land of 160,000 square kilometers, nearly 1,000 sets of weapon systems in Beihai province had begun to operate. Fighter jets took off and warships set sail. On the vast sea, the city on the sea rode the wind and waves on the vast sea. Countless missiles entered the launch procedure, and the Beihai Corps began to mobilize urgently. The rapid response force had been assembled. In the calm voice of the new patriarch of Beihai, the entire Beihai directly showed the fiercest and most ferocious fangs in the night. The interior of Xianxia State was already in chaos. Generals above the rank of Major General in the major theater of operations were asking about the intentions of the army headquarters. Countless people were in a panic. President Li Huaqing of Xianxia State and Prime Minister Chen Fangqin had gathered in the information center of the Hidden Dragon Sea. The technicians struggled to break through the signal blockade of Beihai and contact Wang Xiangxiao. Chen Fangqin, who had always been calm, had cold sweat on his forehead. He glanced at Li Huaqing, grabbed the headset, and said in a deep voice, "Wang Xiangxiao, do you know what you are doing? I order you to stop. There are many things that can't be talked about. I hope you can remember these more than 900 names. They may not be indispensable to Xianxia State, but most of them have made great contributions to Xianxia State. Beihai belongs to Xianxia State. I won't ask anything of Xianxia State, just like in the past." Wang Xiangxiao's voice almost spread throughout Mount Dibing. But in our most difficult time, we hope to preserve some things for Beihai, such as the dignity of more than 20 million people and the free will of more than 20 million people. I won't ask anything of Xianxia State, but I think Beihai should have the right to protect some things that we think are important. Wang Xiangxiao walked down the stage of formidable person and stood on the steps, facing a group of members of the inspection team. "Professor Shuai Yang, do you think my idea is too much? I am the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. I want to think about my Beihai. Is it too much?" "Not at all." A well-dressed middle-aged man in his 50s shook his head in a panic. His voice was trembling, and his eyes were full of regret. "You don't think it's too much? Wang Xianxia laughed. Then I don't quite understand. Since it's not too much, why did you describe the Wang family of Beihai as a cancer of Zhongzhou State in your report to Zhongzhou State? Will it even threaten the system and national security of Zhongzhou State in the future? Can you tell me why? That's a misunderstanding. The professor's body kept trembling, and he almost knelt down. These days, you have received nearly 4 million in cash from Beihai, as well as some other jewels and real gold and silver. Why did you only get the evaluation of cancer? What did Beihai do wrong? You said we were cancer. Wang Xianxiao tilted his head and said with a poker face, "So, doesn't your conscience hurt?" Blood suddenly splashed out from the middle-aged man's chest. There was no saber light or sword shadow. Wang Xianxiao put one palm directly into the professor's chest. Ah! The members of the inspection team nearby all trembled with fear, and many of them screamed. Tell me. He crushed the heart with his palm. In the splashing blood, Wang Xianxiao directly tore the spine of the man. The sound of bones breaking and the screams became one. Xianxiao, I'm Li Huaqing. Don't be impulsive. Things are not irreversible now. We will call back all the inspection team immediately. We want to talk to you. Li Huaqing's voice rang in the headset. Wang Xianxiao raised his head and glanced at the sky. His face appeared on the screen of Yuzhou. There was no expression. The enchantress handed him a white handkerchief. Wang Xianxiao took it, wiped the blood on his palm, and threw the handkerchief on the professor's body. He walked back to Zhuanyuantai and looked at the inspection team below the stage. In the past hundreds of years, Beihai may have done a lot of wrong things, but I can say that we have a clear conscience about Zhongzhou State. So why? When Zhongzhou State needed us, we never gave in. Why do you think this place is a cancer of Zhongzhou State? Because of the Beihai Corps? Because of our military strength? Because we are too strong? So when we are at our weakest, Zhongzhou State wants to rob us of everything, including dignity, freedom, and even the foundation of our survival. His voice was getting louder and louder. If that's the case, then what is Zhongzhou State that we have served for hundreds of years? No one spoke. Everyone was looking at Wang Xianxiao. Even Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing were silent. At this moment, in front of countless TVs in Beihai province, the pictures suddenly changed. Wang Xianxiao's figure disappeared. 2 videos appeared on the TVs. They were both from Mount Dibing. But they were different from Mount Dibing. The night Li Tianlan went to Mount Dibing. The fire was fierce, and the sword energy was soaring. The sword that the mysterious chosen one attacked Mount Dibing turned everything into ashes, and the ground was white. Everyone saw the 2 videos. I remember a lot of things. I also remember that during the weakest period of the Wang family of Beihai, we didn't get any help from Zhongzhou State. All we got was temptation and oppression. I don't think Beihai and Zhongzhou State will become enemies, but now it seems that Zhongzhou State has abandoned Beihai. Xianxiao. Wang Xianxiao you. Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing's faces changed dramatically. Wang Xianxiao's voice was calm and cold. I want to reiterate one point. The violent sword intent gathered in front of him and formed a storm. The storm covered more than a dozen inspection teams and nearly 200 members. Wang Xianxiao was expressionless. The Wang family of Beihai will be weak and strong one day. But no matter what state we are in, the last thing we are afraid of is the enemy. Boom! At this moment, the entire Beihai province seemed to be roaring. One after another, streams of light rushed up from the bases in various cities of Beihai province, bringing a large area of fire in the air. It was like the prelude to the war. Hundreds of missiles were launched into the air. The next moment, they rushed directly into the sky. The faces of countless people in Zhongzhou State changed dramatically. Between the sky and the sea, the missiles shone like stars in the night sky. Missiles fell into the sea one after another, creating a deafening roar and stirring up a monstrous wild wolf. The Wang family of Beihai is fearless because there are more than 20 million people in Beihai province. You have been guarding Mount Dibing for the past hundreds of years, and Mount Dibing will be your strongest backing. From now on behalf of the Wang family of Beihai, I will recruit 800,000 soldiers from the entire Beihai province. Brothers and sisters of Beihai. The waves rose and fell. Wang Xiangxiao's voice suddenly rose, overshadowing the wild wolf of Beihai, like a thunder. This era, the storm-like sword energy engulfed all the members of the inspection team. Blood suddenly burst out in the sword energy. Wang Xiangxiao's last voice fell. There's going to be a war. In the past hundreds of years, the people of Beihai had traveled all over the world, facing different difficulties and opportunities, facing different people and different countries, and they would say that they were from Beihai. People of Beihai. This was the pride that came from their bones. It was Mount Dibing that gave them this pride. The mountain that had become a piece of white land and even been divided into two halves was like the tiniest flame, but it ignited the pride and faith of tens of millions of people in Beihai in an instant. This night, in Beihai, in different cities, in different corners, there were different people. All the people of Beihai were roaring and roaring in unison. The will of countless people was like a raging fire that swept the entire Beihai province. It burned everything and completely condensed the faith of hundreds of years. Long live Beihai! Long live His Majesty Sword Emperor! Chapter 757. The fire was burning. It was a kind of passion and fanaticism that most ordinary people couldn't imagine. That night, Beihai province, which had been quiet since Wang Tianzong disappeared, was restless, like a giant standing up in the valley, roaring and condensing its most powerful strength. The Beihai Corps had more than 200,000 troops. A cold and bloody atmosphere enveloped the entire Beihai province. The elite soldiers were endless, as if they were going to fill every street and alley of every city in Beihai province. Battles of various scales kept breaking out. The entire Beihai province ushered in the largest cleanup in recent decades. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital, the Heroes Club, the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Raining School, the Vatican, and even Emperor Dong's palace, which had just gotten on the right track. Most of the other forces lurking in Beihai province were uprooted overnight. The missiles whistled in the air with a long tail flame, raging in the deep sea, and the city began to be stained with blood. The Beihai Corps was showing their strength and attitude in a very determined manner. At 12 o'clock in the evening, nearly 800 spies of various forces were sent to Mount Dibing, covered with cuts and bruises. Countless forces were trying to contact Wang Xiangxiao, intending to redeem their senior intelligence personnel with benefits. This was originally a tacit understanding among the forces in the Dark World, but Wang Xiangxiao directly broke the rule and refused all communication requests. The sword energy flew on the stage of Formidable Person, and the intelligence personnel from different forces were chopped into pieces by the sword light one by one. Nearly 1,000 corpses were directly thrown into the Beihai behind the stage of Formidable Person. Blood spread on the sea level, and the waves that hit the cliff seemed to be the color of blood. The enlistment order from the Beihai Corps had been officially issued to every corner of Beihai province at night. The Beihai Corps planned to recall all the veterans who had served in the Beihai Corps in the past 15 years and had a series of plans to recruit new soldiers. The wind and clouds were surging. The whole world was in a state of turmoil. In the center of all the storms, Wang Xiangxiao threw the body of an intelligence personnel off the stage of Formidable Person. The entire Mount Dibing fell into silence again. He sat quietly on the stage of Formidable Person, covered in blood, but his aura was getting quieter and quieter. The soldiers of the Beihai Corps on the stage of Formidable Person retreated one by one. Then the internal defense force. In the end, even the experts like the Enchantress retreated. Wang Xiangxiao didn't move. He just looked at the turbulent sea in the distance. One missile after another exploded into flames in the distance, like bright fireworks. The night gradually deepened. On the surface of the sea below the stage of Formidable Person, the smell of blood slowly dissipated. Facing the cold sea breeze, Wang Xiangxiao sat on the stage of Formidable Person for a whole night. When the darkness gradually dispersed, he slowly stood up. Looking at the hazy dawn, he silently turned around and left the stage of Formidable Person. A squadron of fighter planes flew over Mount Dibing at a low altitude and entered Beihai. The roar of the engine created a wave of sound. Wang Xianxia looked up at the fighter plane that was gradually disappearing and pursed his lips tightly. It seemed that it was not until this moment that he really realized that after giving up the process of wrangling and compromising, no matter how glorious the Wang family of Beihai was before, no matter how powerful it was now, under his decision, the current Wang family of Beihai, he no longer had any trump cards. He took a deep breath, turned around, and walked down Mount Dibing. This era, we're going to war. The loud and clear voice echoed in the somewhat dark office. In the long silence, a hand reached over and slowly closed the laptop. The office was filled with smoke. He pushed the window open, and the fresh air blew in with a chill. Outside the window was a vast expanse of silver. The dancing snowflakes occupied the sky of Fanio City. What do you think? In the low voice, Wang Qinglei was also smoking on the big screen. Smart approach, stupid behavior. Wang Xiaoyao turned around and looked at Wang Qinglei. He shook his head and said, "It's not easy." Wang Qinglei put out the cigarette butt and couldn't help but light another one. He said gloomily, "The little guy put himself in the position of the victim, which means that he won the hearts of the people. He did a good job after he went back. During this time, Beihai has been really depressed. He expelled Di Jiang, captured Su Xinghe, and decisively cleaned up all the exposed weaknesses of the Wang family of Beihai. Then he started to fight back. Now Beihai's morale is high. You shouldn't have let him go back to Zhongzhou State. I'll detain him. In less than 3 days, sister-in-law will come here to ask me for him." Wang Xiaoyao said flatly, "I'm no match for her now." "What should we do now?" Wang Qinglei took a deep breath and suppressed his agitated mood. "At this time, being so aggressive will probably put us in a passive position. He was talking about us." The so-called us referred to him and Wang Xiaoyao. "What did the parliament say?" Wang Xiaoyao suddenly asked. "There should be a meeting soon, right?" "I haven't received any notice yet. Probably tomorrow. Right now, the president is in the army headquarters building and has gathered all the officers above lieutenant general to study the situation." Wang Qinglei shook his head. At this time, the 9 directors of Zhongzhou State should have communicated with each other. In the face of a possible war, the attitude of the entire military was more important than that of ordinary members of parliament, especially in such a sensitive situation. Study the situation? Wang Xiaoyao sneered. What else is there to study? It's obvious that they want to fight to the death. Being cornered, he can put himself in a desperate situation. Does Zhongzhou State dare to do that? It's not a question of whether they dare or not. Wang Qinglei frowned and gave a wry smile. Whether to go to war or not, of course, it was not a question of whether they dared or not. It was not even a question of whether they could or were willing to. For Zhongzhou State, there was never an option to go to war in this game. Political games were not about fighting. In other words, it was an art, the art of balance and compromise. Zhongzhou State just wanted to take the leadership of the Wang family of Beihai, and that was the most important thing. It didn't mean that if you dared to fight with me, I would dare to kill you. If you had this kind of idea, you would not be able to get to the top. The top always pursued balance. This was the basic principle. In this principle, they would strive for the greatest benefits. Even if the war broke out and the whole Beihai was destroyed, so what? It was meaningless. If Beihai was destroyed, Zhongzhou State would get nothing. If it couldn't win, there would be endless troubles. If it won, it would also be a scene of chicken feathers. This option was impossible. So when Wang Xingshiao made it clear that he would fight to the death, Zhongzhou State would definitely take the initiative to take a step back to reach a new balance. This was Wang Xingshiao's cleverness. And his so-called stupidity was because this step was too tough. Zhongzhou State would choose to compromise, but it was impossible to give up Beihai. As the strongest overlord in the world, Zhongzhou State could not accept threats. At present, Wang Xingshiao's step could make Zhongzhou State retreat, but after the strong move, Beihai was destined to pay more for it. Wang Xiaoyao glanced at Wang Qinglei. If he guessed correctly, in order to reach a balance that satisfied all parties, the scale of the southeast group would probably shrink. In order to stabilize the situation, it would probably directly harm Wang Qinglei's interests. But in Wang Xiaoyao's view, no matter what, it would damage the overall strength of the Wang family of Beihai. Was it stupid to do so? Wang Xiaoyao had a headache. In his view, Wang Xingshiao was still too young. "You're too anxious," he said slowly. "No matter who sits in the position of the patriarch, the fundamental interests of the Wang family of Beihai must be protected. Now look at what the little guy did. Does it look like he cares about this?" Wang Qinglei's tone was a little excited. "So you're too anxious. If you hadn't forced him to do so, he wouldn't have done this." Wang Xiaoyao glanced at him. Wang Qinglei took a big drag on his cigarette and was silent for a long time. "Do you think I have a choice?" After a long time, Wang Qinglei took a deep breath and said sullenly, "Recently, Yi Dongxing has made a lot of moves inside the group. I can't help but be nervous." Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes. Yi Dongxing, the god of army. He was Wang Tianzong's close friend and one of the leaders with deep roots in the southeast group. Wang Xingxiao and Wang Yuetong had stayed in Yuzhou for a period of time when they were young. During those years, they lived in Yi Dongxing's home. From this alone, it could be seen the deep personal friendship between Yi Dongxing and Wang Tianzong. Wang Xiaoyao had a very good relationship with him before. But after he came to Eastern Europe, the two had no private contact. "He wants a position?" Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and said with a faint smile. "Wherever there is a position for him, it's either his or mine. Is he going to take Wen Siyuan's position?" Wang Qinglei said sullenly. Wang Xiaoyao nodded and somewhat understood. The Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group were closely connected. The two existed in Zhongzhou State for exactly the same time. The Southeast Group also experienced heyday and decline. For hundreds of years, at the peak of the Southeast Group, 4 of the 7 directors of the Zhongzhou State Parliament came from the Southeast Group. During the period of decline, only one of the 9 directors came from the Southeast Group. And this person jumped from the position of Speaker of Beihai to the highest level. For example, the current Vice President of Zhongzhou State, Wan Qinyun, used to be the Speaker of Beihai. In other words, every time the list of the Parliament changed, the Speaker of Beihai was destined to enter the list of directors. This was also an important means for the Wang family of Beihai to stabilize its own foundation. At present, the Southeast Group was not weak, but it was not in its heyday either. It was just one of the stronger groups among the 6. There were still 2 years before the next shuffle of the parliament. Some positions had vaguely come to a conclusion. Li Huaqing, Chen Fangqing, and other veteran directors would retire, while Dongqing Wudi would stay. Within the Southeast Group, there would be 2 places to become a member of the parliament in the next session. Speaker of Beihai Wen Siyuan would become one of the 9 directors. The other, according to the normal development, should have been Speaker of Wuyue Wang Qinglei. Wang Qinglei's ability and Wuyue's status were enough for him to go further and take over Wan Qingyun's position. But with the constant turmoil in the Wang family of Beihai, the aggressiveness of Zhongzhou State, and Wang Qinglei's eagerness to make trouble, the current patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and some high-level members of the Southeast Group obviously had other ideas. Yi Dongxing's recent actions were a signal that made Wang Qinglei extremely uneasy. Wen Siyuan's position was unshakable. The remaining position would be directly contested by Wang Qinglei and Yi Dongxing. Facing Yi Dongxing, even Wang Qinglei felt a lot of pressure, so he had to take measures. This was also an important reason why Wang Xingxiao was so strong tonight and even did not hesitate to fight to the death. Wang Xiaoyao sat behind his desk and looked at the flying snow outside the window. He suddenly asked, "Which position does General Yi want?" Dongqing Wudi's position. He can't get it. His position is still very stable. 1 level higher, and he should be Dongqing Wudi's deputy. Wang Qinglei said slowly. Between him and Yi Dongxing, no matter who was 1 level higher, they would have the title of vice president. But the point was that in Zhongzhou State, if it was just a simple title of vice president without other duties, even if it was not a decoration, it would not have any real power. The current vice president Wan Qingyun's actual job could be said to be in charge of personnel in Zhongzhou State. He was an important candidate to check and balance the power of the president and lead the direction of the Ministry of Personnel. With this power, he would have real power. A director. If Wang Qinglei went further, he should take over the current Wang Qingyun and strive to become the deputy minister of the army headquarters before the next reshuffle, establishing his position as the crown prince. If Yi Dongxing wanted to go further, he would be the vice president and also the deputy minister of the army headquarters. He couldn't replace Dongqing Wudi. If he went further in rank, he could restrict Dongqing Wudi's power, especially now that Li Tianlan had risen. If Dongqing Wudi took full control of the army headquarters, the situation in the future would be really unfriendly to the Southeast group. But if it was Yi Dongxing this time, Wang Qinglei would almost be abandoned by the Southeast group, and it would be difficult for him to make a comeback in the future, which would have a great impact on the layout of the Southeast group. Therefore, at present, there were people who supported Yi Dongxing and Wang Qinglei, which also meant that Wang Qinglei's position was unstable and he could not be anxious. What about those missiles? Wang Xiaoyao asked. The scheduled range of the missiles is a little short, and they all fell in Beihai. But the nearest one is less than 10 nautical miles from Liaodong, and they are all conventional missiles. The problem was suppressed by speaker by Qingqian of Liaodong. Wang Qinglei said gloomily. It was not impossible to suppress the problem, and it was not even a sea area problem. After all, Beihai was also a part of Zhongzhou State, and the sea area of Zhongzhou State was also the sea area of Beihai Province. What was the problem of detonating some missiles in the sea? The question was why Bai Qingqian suppressed it. The cooperation between the group and Dongqing Wudi should not be so close. Wang Xiaoyao frowned. There are some problems here. Find a chance to contact the other party. Now it seems that Dongqing Wudi's attitude is very important. Wang Qinglei was thoughtful. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, I'll try. The meeting in the building of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State ended late at night. When Li Huaqing returned to the Hidden Dragon Sea from the army headquarters, Prime Minister Chen Fangqing was already sitting in his office. Seeing him enter, Chen Fangqing stood up, skipped the formalities, and asked directly, How is it? Li Huaqing shook his head, picked up the teacup, drank some water, leaned back in the chair, and sighed. Chen Fangqing suddenly frowned, hesitated, and asked, What's the problem? Dongqing Wudi's attitude is not very clear. Li Huaqing said bluntly. Both he and Chen Fangqing knew very well that now that the situation had developed to this point, they definitely had to make some concessions. However, in the face of such a powerful North Sea, even if they made concessions, the military could not act as if nothing had happened. The military had to show a tough attitude. This was the main topic of the meeting. But Dongqing Wudi's attitude was extremely subtle. In principle, he agreed to give a tough warning to Beihai, but not in the name of the army headquarters, but in the name of the parliament. From another perspective, the so-called agreement in principle did not make sense at all. It was tantamount to Dongqing Wudi kicking the ball back to the parliament and asking the parliament to give a conclusion. But Chen Fangqing raised his eyebrows. The cooperation between them should be limited to Li Tianlan. If Dongqing Wudi really has such an attitude, it is equal to the cooperation between the two sides in all aspects. What's the reason? I don't know. Li Huaqing shook his head. But it's not all because of Li Tianlan. Chen Fangqing looked at Li Huaqing inquiringly. I mentioned Li Tianlan's matter to him tonight. Before the meeting began, I hoped the army headquarters would make a tough response. I even proposed to let Li Tianlan go to Beihai in the near future. He couldn't have not understood what I meant, but he refused. Li Huaqing said blandly. Chen Fangqing took a deep breath, and his face became a little dignified. Li Huaqing asked the army headquarters to give the Wang family of Beihai a stern warning, and even proposed to let Li Tianlan lead a team to Beihai. His meaning was already very clear. In order to suppress the arrogance of the Wang family of Beihai and beat Wang Xingxiao, he was willing to let Li Tianlan out, let go of the matter in Tiannan, and put pressure on the Wang family of Beihai from another angle. That was to say, as long as Li Tianlan went to Beihai, he could return to Tiannan. Such a condition had been given, but Dongqing Wudi refused. He would rather let Li Tianlan stay in the desert prison for a while and help the Wang family of Beihai. Why did he do that? At this time, the two of them looked at each other and were a little confused. The toughness of the Wang family of Beihai at this time could be said to have violated a big taboo. Wang Xianxia forced the council to take a step back. After that, Beihai was bound to give a huge concession. Dongqing Wudi helped Beihai, but it was impossible to be tough to the end. There must also be a compromise. This kind of compromise might be a few very valuable positions in the giant group, or even more benefits. His helping here was tantamount to harming the interests of the giant group. And the missile launch from Beihai is very close to Liaodong, but the Liaodong provincial government has not reported this situation so far. It seems that it has been suppressed. Li Huaqing said softly. Chen Fangqing took a deep look at Li Huaqing. Liaodong. It was the place where Li Huaqing used to work, and it was once regarded as the back garden of the academics. Bai Qingqian had been the speaker of Liaodong for less than one term, but she had already controlled the situation in Liaodong, and what she did represented not only Dongqing Wudi. Although she was Dongqing Wudi's wife, she was also Bai Zhanfang's daughter. That was to say, Bai Qingqian and the Bai family also agreed to support the Wang family of Beihai and let Li Tianlan stay in the desert for a while, even at the expense of a part of the interests of the giant group. Chen Fangqing took a deep breath and lit a cigarette. The white smoke rose and lingered like a fog. All the situation became confusing in the fog. He shook his head and whispered, Dongqing Wudi? What is he thinking? Chapter 758. It was September 23rd. Li Tianlan had been in the desert prison for a year. Compared with the turbulence of the outside world, the desert prison had completely calmed down. The topic of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace inside Zhongzhou State had gradually decreased. The task force that had been investigating Qi Mulan's treason had also ceased to exist. The constantly changing situation seemed to have no effect on the desert prison, and Li Tianlan had a completely undisturbed life. The layout of the warden's dormitory was still the same. The only change might be that there were some plants in the originally gloomy dormitory. Some green plants that were difficult to survive in the desert were placed in the dormitory, adding a seemingly insubstantial breath of life. Yes, it was insubstantial. All the vitality looked extremely fake. The warden's dormitory, which looked much softer, became colder and colder in the eyes of others. Fewer and fewer people dared to approach the warden's dormitory. Life in the desert prison was boring and repetitive. Even the place where felons gathered still had its own liveliness. But the door of the warden's dormitory was getting quieter and quieter, and eventually became deathly still. Even several deputy wardens whose dormitories were close to Li Tianlan had quietly changed their places. Day or night, the warden's dormitory was quiet, without any breath. Xiao Mahai braced himself and stood in front of the door of what used to be his dormitory. His body was straight, and he deliberately slowed down his breathing. His body was as stiff as a statue. He didn't dare to knock on the door. He had been standing here for nearly 3 hours, but he didn't look impatient at all. He just waited cautiously. The desert was dry and hot. But this area was extremely cold. It was not the kind of cool that made people feel refreshed, but a kind of sharp and piercingly cold feeling, as if the blade of a sword was pressed against the skin, which made people's hair stand on end. A faintly discernible breath enveloped Xiao Mahai's body. As an expert of the thunder-shocking realm, he was extremely sensitive to power. Standing here, he could clearly feel that countless blades completely enveloped him. This was not sword energy, but more like a kind of momentum that made his whole body tremble. This momentum was constantly spreading with the warden's dormitory as the center, gradually covering the entire prison in a slow but incomparably determined manner. The warden's dormitory was extremely luxurious. It had its own bathroom, and one could also bathe in the sun. Therefore, Li Tianlan had been staying in the dormitory for 6 months and had never left it. He cleared out the TV, telephone, computer, and all the communication and entertainment facilities in the dormitory. He didn't want to receive any information from the outside world. He just asked Xiao Mahai for a lot of pen and paper. At first, Xiaomahai was curious about what Li Tianlan was doing in the dormitory. He also had a channel to get information. Xiaomahai did bring his daughter and sister to the desert prison. His daughter, Xiaoqing, was 21 years old this year. She was still young but not ignorant. She was a top student at Renmin University of Zhongzhou State. She was clean and pretty. Under her father's instruction, she suspended her studies from school and came to the desert prison to become the young highness's little maid. His younger sister, Xiao Shui, was a 30-year-old young woman with charming charm. She had just gotten married and had no children. Her moral integrity was obviously not important to Xiaomahai anymore. He put his sister and daughter together with Li Tianlan. His meaning was obvious. He hoped that Li Tianlan could choose one that suited his taste. If he was not picky, he could try all of them. Xiaomahai thought that although they were not devastatingly beautiful, they were stunning enough to relieve the boring life in the desert to a certain extent. However, from beginning to end, Li Tianlan never touched them. He didn't even show any interest in them. But he didn't drive them away. Instead, he let them stay. Therefore, Xiaomahai had the conditions to observe Li Tianlan's daily life. In the beginning, Li Tianlan would politely invite them to have dinner together. Xiaomahai would carefully record some of his favorite dishes, such as the time to get up, the temperature of the water he was used to bathe, the strength of the massage, and other trivial things. Xiaomahai regarded them as the most important things and carefully wrote them down in the notebook. After memorizing them, he would destroy the notebook. However, these things seemed to be less and less useful now. According to his daughter, Xiaoqing, Li Tianlan spent most of his time in the room practicing calligraphy at first. The air in the dormitory seemed to become colder and colder at that time. After using the brush and ink sent by Xiaomahai, Li Tianlan did not ask for more. Instead, he was in a daze. Most of the time, he sat on the bed or stood in front of the window. He could stand there for a whole day. He didn't know what he was thinking. Xiaomahai carefully analyzed Li Tianlan's state and felt that it should be martial arts meditation. However, meditation could last for a whole day. The requirement of willpower was incredible. However, as time went by, the situation was getting more and more exaggerated. Li Tianlan was no longer practicing calligraphy. His meditation time was getting longer and longer. From the first day to now, sometimes it would last for 2 or 3 days. Some of the recorded schedules became completely irregular. Li Tianlan often didn't eat for 2 or 3 days and didn't need massages to relax. Every time those dishes he liked were sent in, they were either left intact or completely gone. Even the other dishes that Xiaomahai matched according to the nutritious diet were all swept away. Li Tianlan's appetite seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. He could eat anything. Now, the amount of food he needed for one meal was almost equivalent to the total amount of food for more than 10 adults. Xiaomahai occasionally came to deliver food to Li Tianlan in person. He was lucky enough to see Li Tianlan several times. With an increasing appetite, he could clearly feel that Li Tianlan's body was getting thinner and thinner. His spirit seemed to be stretched to the limit, and he became more and more haggard. But at the same time, every time he saw Li Tianlan, Xiaomahai could clearly feel that his sword energy was getting colder and colder. Li Tianlan's strength seemed to be growing, and he felt more and more dangerous. The last time he saw Li Tianlan, he didn't even dare to look directly into Li Tianlan's eyes when he saw Li Tianlan's seemingly fragile body. The feeling of danger continued to accumulate and eventually turned into the most thorough fear. Xiaomahai even didn't dare to face Li Tianlan. Documents from Zhongzhou State and Xianyuan City were sent to Xiaomahai's computer almost every once in a while. The general trend of Zhongzhou State was surging. Xianyuan City was developing quietly and steadily. Xiaomahai firmly remembered Li Tianlan's instructions. If there was nothing that needed to disturb him, he would suppress it all and not report to Li Tianlan. But this time, the situation was obviously different. After more than half a year, Dongqing Wudi would inspect the desert prison again, and there was another person with him. A special person who didn't belong to the system of Zhongzhou State, and no one even knew his specific identity. Military counselor of Samsara Palace. Xiaomahai hesitated for a long time before he decided to come to Li Tianlan and tell him the news. There was no sound in the dormitory. The long, almost eternal meditation seemed to have no end. The subtle but countless sharp edges slowly spread. Xiao Mahai stood in front of the door and only felt that countless cold seemed to penetrate into his skin and internal organs. His whole body became a little stiff. Light footsteps could be heard. A young woman with a plump and enchanting figure and a very dignified and elegant face came over with a huge food box. When she saw Xiao Mahai, she was slightly stunned and said softly, "Brother." Xiao Mahai glanced at her and shook his head. The young woman bit her lip, took 2 careful steps, and slowly put the food box in front of the dormitory. The food box touched the ground with a slight sound. The eternal silence in the room seemed to be broken. A somewhat hoarse voice rang out. "What's the matter?" The young woman's face turned pale in an instant. She stood stiffly in place and was at a loss. Xiao Mahai's body trembled, and he subconsciously bent down and said respectfully, "Your Highness, Minister Dongqing will come to inspect the desert prison at noon tomorrow." Li Tianlan said yes. Military counselor of Samsara Palace will come to the desert prison with the minister. Xiao Mahai continued to speak. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. Military counselor. Obviously, Dongqing Wudi came here this time because military counselor had something to ask him. After the destruction of Samsara Palace, Saint had the closest contact with him. What was military counselor going to do here? And why didn't Saint inform him? Creak. The closed door of the dormitory was opened. Li Tianlan's figure appeared at the door. "Where's the official document?" Xiao Mahai's heart suddenly twitched. The sense of danger that made him deeply afraid almost rose to the peak in an instant, and even made his blood stop flowing. He subconsciously lowered his head, moved stiffly, and handed the official document in his hand to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan glanced down and nodded. "I see." He picked up the food box and turned around, intending to close the door. "Your Highness." Xiao Mahai's voice trembled violently. Your body." Xiao Mahai's voice was a little frightened. In half a year, Li Tianlan had completely changed. He seemed to be a little taller, but his figure was several times thinner. His eyes were calmer, and an invisible momentum was slightly fluctuating around him, as if it could penetrate the whole world. This Li Tianlan was extremely fragile. This Li Tianlan was also extremely dangerous. In Xiao Mahai's opinion, now Li Tianlan was like an extremely fragile but extremely sharp magic weapon, with the sharpness to cut everything, but he would break at any time. "It's okay." Li Tianlan took a deep look at him and suddenly asked, "Old Xiao, what do you mean by the real invincibility?" Xiao Mahai opened his mouth and finally smiled bitterly. "I don't know." He was in the Thundershocking realm, and it was the hopeless Thundershocking realm. How could he know what the real invincibility was? Only people like Your Highness can have the answer to such a question. "I can see it, but there is no way, so I have no answer." Li Tianlan said quietly, "I have found many ways." He narrowed his eyes and was silent for a moment. Maybe the patriarch was right. Chapter 759. The dead dormitory was covered with a thin layer of ice. But the air was not humid, but extremely dry and cold. The sharp sword intent filled every corner of the dormitory. Countless tiny sword lights hovered around each other, shaking the space. The air in the dormitory gradually twisted in a shape visible to the naked eye, and then returned to its original state. Then, it was twisted again by new sword intent. Irregular distortions were everywhere. The space in the dormitory looked extremely vague, as if it were fake. Li Tianlan sat on the bed and silently looked at the document sent to Xiao Mahai by the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Wudi, military counselor. Military counselor's code name was directly written in the document. What did it mean? Dongqing Wudi did not need any reason to come to the prison for inspection. But military counselors coming here clearly had something to do with him. The fact that this matter could be written in the document also meant that it had been recognized by the Parliament of Zhongzhou State. But strictly speaking, he was still a major suspect in Zhongzhou State. Why did the Parliament agree to military counselor coming here? Li Tianlan looked at his watch. There were still a few hours before the time stated in the document. He simply gave up the idea of studying the recent situation and raised his hand casually. With a slight sound, the stack of materials that Xiao Mahai had just brought over was instantly smashed into dust by the sword energy. Li Tianlan turned around, picked up a tablet from the bed and turned it on. The computer was not connected to the internet, nor did it have any extra facilities. In addition to the most basic functions, there was only a video on the desktop. The video had been played countless times in the past 6 months. Li Tianlan watched it quietly. The overwhelming sword energy, mixed with fallen leaves, split the mountain peak and covered the sky with a sword. In the past 6 months, after countless speculations and observations, Li Tianlan was more and more sure that, in a sense, this sword strike was almost equal to the end of martial arts. To be exact, the person who made this sword strike really stood on the end of martial arts. In the past 6 months, he had observed this sword strike countless times. Now Li Tianlan could roughly guess the power of this sword strike if it was made with all its strength. That would be truly earth-shattering. Even if Li Tianlan reached the ultimate peak, his achievement would be no more than this. So when the whole dark world was curious about who he was, Li Tianlan only thought about how he did it. It had been more than half a year. The other party was like a passerby in this world. After destroying Mount Dibbing with a sword, there was no news. The private plane was still parked at Beihai Airport. No country or force in the world had found any clue related to the other party. No one knew who he was. But now, Li Tianlan could vaguely guess how the other party had done it. His guess might not be correct, but in his opinion, this should be the path closest to the truth. This was originally the path that he had envisioned for himself. Standing at his current height and looking at the martial arts ahead of him at his age, he had many choices. Different paths represented different meanings. Li Tianlan had a clear but unclear plan for his martial arts. The reason why it was unclear was that he had too many choices. This road was the safest. The possibility of reaching the end of martial arts was slightly lower, but it was safer and took longer. At the lowest limit of this road, Li Tianlan estimated that he could reach the level of Wang Tianzong in Eastern Europe. The second road was relatively safe. It was possible to reach the end of martial arts, but it required a lot of accumulation. Li Tianlan estimated that if he took this road, even if he could reach the peak, it would take at least 20 or 30 years. The third path was the riskiest. To some extent, it was not safe at all. And the direction of martial arts represented by this path was a little vague. In other words, it could no longer be regarded as real martial arts. Walking on this path, Li Tianlan could be sure that as long as he did not die, he could make his lethality reach the real peak in the shortest time possible. He had been hesitating about his choice. With his character, the attraction of the third road to him was simply fatal. Before he made up his mind, the video in front of him directly gave him great inspiration. At least in Li Tianlan's view, the other party's sword could be called a model of taking the third road to the end. The so-called third road might not be a subversion of the map of God of War of the Li family, but to some extent, it could be said to be the opposite of the map of God of War. This road could also be said to be the original road. Li Tianlan slowly raised his palm. The morning sun had not yet risen, and the dormitory was dark. An incomparably faint glimmer appeared on his fingertips. The subtle sword energy slowly swirled around his hand. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the light on his fingertips, and his whole palm suddenly shook. Buzz! All of a sudden, a slight buzzing sound rang out in the silent prison, like the sound of a sword blade vibrating the air. The next moment, a slight cracking sound rang throughout the prison. With Li Tianlan as the center, the ground of the prison suddenly spread into countless dense cracks. The cracks spread rapidly and almost filled the entire prison in the blink of an eye. At this moment, all the prisoners in the prison subconsciously straightened their bodies. Everyone stared at the surrounding walls, dumbfounded. Cracks kept radiating out, and a dense spider web directly appeared in the prison made of alloy. The majestic and cold edge completely surrounded the entire prison. The cracks spreading in all directions rushed out of the maze prison and rushed into the square. The cracks on the ground zigzagged and extended, and the solid and transparent cover above the square had countless cracks. The majestic edge rushed out of the prison's surface, and a large area of yellow sand outside shook. The next second, an earth-shattering roar sounded directly. The desert prison seemed to turn from night to day all of a sudden. The awe-inspiring power exceeded the warning line of the third eye weapon system in an instant. The next moment, endless lasers and artillery fire kept shooting in the base, and the desert dozens of miles around turned into a piece of scorched earth in an instant. Not only the prisoners, but even Xianxia was shivering and sweating profusely. The artillery fire raged endlessly. Li Tianlan stood in front of the window and looked at the bright fireworks in the desert. He lowered his head again and looked at his palm. A tiny crack appeared in his hand. Like the cracks on the ground, the fine cracks spread along his palm, and in an instant his palm was covered in cracks. Blood gushed out from the cracks and slid on the surface of the wounds. Under the flashes of gunfire outside, his face looked a little pale. Li Tianlan looked at the blood in his hands and clenched his fists. A faint white mist rose from his blood-stained palm. White mist surged on his palm, and the small wound quickly healed. Li Tianlan was silent and expressionless. Expression? I'm fine. He suddenly opened his mouth and said. Xianxia, who was not far from the dormitory entrance, paused. He hesitated for a moment before turning around and returning to his dormitory. His entire body was soaked in cold sweat. His face was pale, and he was still in a state of shock. After a long time, he picked up the phone and called the duty room, casually instructing them about the maintenance of the prison. He was not worried that the prisoners would escape at all. Although the blade just now tore the entire prison apart, it was still a hole. Not to mention whether the prisoners had the ability to break it, even if they could really escape, the endless gunfire outside the window, which could cover dozens of miles in an instant, was enough to deter them from the idea of escaping. Xianxia put down the phone and was in a daze. He was no longer sleepy. He had heard of Li Tianlan for a long time. Li Tianlan had stayed here for nearly a year. Xianxia had been attentively serving the man who was said to be the most likely to become the future chosen one. He was conscientious. But what had always made Xianxia uneasy was that he did not know Li Tianlan's strength. He only knew that he was very strong and was the youngest expert of the invincible realm in the dark world. This statement was too general. In the past 6 months, the situation in the outside world had been turbulent. Although Xianxia's confidence had not been shaken, as the situation developed, he became more and more anxious. Li Tianlan had not been able to enter the invincible realm for a long time, which made him a little flustered. But at this moment, looking at the dense cobweb-like cracks on the surrounding walls, looking at the lasers and gunfire that crisscrossed the world outside the desert, his heart finally calmed down completely. He was the warden of the desert prison, and no one knew the 2 military bases near the prison better than he did, especially the fully automated Sky Eye base. As a fully automated military base, the warden also had the most basic control authority. Even if there was no one to control it, the Sky Eye base could still fight back, because the core of this system was added with an automatic identification system, and the measurement index was defined by the destructive power. The gunfire outside the window was still shining wildly and endlessly. Xianxia turned on the computer and entered the weapon operating system of the Sky Eye. On the main page of the system, a big S was constantly flashing with red light. There were only 2 situations in which the system would automatically enter the state of fire. The first was when the prison encountered great destruction. The so-called great destruction was called X level in the system. The other situation was when the prison suffered great destruction. The code name of great destruction in the system was S level. The so-called destructive power was not limited to manpower, but a series of indicators such as blasting and bombing could be calculated in it. The destructive power of S level. In terms of the destructive strength of manpower, this kind of destructive power was close to the level of the peak of the invincible realm. Close to the peak of the invincible realm. There was no doubt that this was Li Tianlan's current strength. The strength when he had not officially entered the invincible realm. Xianxia looked a little excited. Li Tianlan had been in the desert prison for a year. It was impossible for such a person to waste here for too long. Obviously, when Li Tianlan left here, it was also the time for him to leave here. The time should be getting closer and closer. You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.